Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we are going to be going through a very interesting topic, which is the life of Malala Yousafzai.
Oh, absolutely.
But we're going to be going beyond, just the sort of well-known elements of her story and really try to dig in,
Yeah.
using her autobiography, I Am Malala, as sort of the core source material.
Right.
So I think we're going to uncover some pretty fascinating stuff.
I'm really excited for this one. I think
Hmm.
this is a really, really important story, and it's one that I think a lot of people think they know.
Right.
But, when you really delve into Malala's own words,
Yeah.
you get a much deeper understanding of, the context, the world she came from, both the beauty and the harsh realities.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we try to do here at the deep dive, right? Is look beyond just the sort of the headlines and the things that we think we know and actually get into like the nitty-gritty details
Yeah.
of an event or a person's life in this case.
Absolutely. And I think with Malala's story, it's so important to understand that context because it's not just a personal story,
Right.
right? It's a window into a whole culture and its struggles.
Exactly. So like let's start at the beginning, right?
Eh,
With Malala's childhood.
Yeah.
She paints a really vivid picture of Swat Valley in Pakistan.
Yeah.
Um which, people call it the Switzerland of the East.
Right.
And she really describes it as this like paradise, of
Mhm.
mountains and waterfalls and crystal clear lakes.
Yeah, she talks about this incredible natural beauty, and you can
Yeah.
really feel the love she has for her homeland.
Yeah.
But she's also, she doesn't shy away from some of the less idyllic aspects of life in Swat Valley.
Yeah.
The poverty, the limited infrastructure,
Right.
and the deeply ingrained societal norms, especially when
Mhm.
it came to women's roles.
Yeah. So this is really fascinating to me, right? Because you have the sort of contrast
Yeah.
between like this idealized image that maybe some people have in their minds of, this beautiful valley,
Hmm.
and then this like really complex reality of what it's like to live there.
Absolutely. And, I think that contrast is something that really shaped Malala's worldview even before the events that, made her famous.
Yeah.
It's like this backdrop against which her story unfolds.
Yeah, and that's what makes it so compelling, right? Is that it's not a simple story.
Right.
It's not like a, black and white story. It's a very nuanced kind of
Okay.
story, and I think that makes her even more of an
Mhm.
interesting figure.
Yeah.
Um okay, so let's talk a little bit about her dad Ziauddin Yousafzai because he comes up a lot in the book, obviously.
Oh, he's a central figure.
Yeah, and so for people who don't know a lot about him, what can you tell us about this guy?
Well, he was a teacher and a poet,
Yeah.
but I think more importantly, he was just fiercely passionate about education,
Yeah.
and especially for girls.
Yeah.
He really believed that education was the key to empowering women.
It's interesting because in the book, even like Malala's birth itself is
Uh,
presented as this kind of act of defiance
Yeah.
because, this is a culture that often favors sons,
Hmm.
right? And her father celebrates her arrival with joy, and he names her after this like Pashtun heroine Malalai of Maiwand,
Yeah.
who like led an army against the British Right.
Yeah. She rallied the Pashtun troops to victory
Hmm.
in this really key battle in the 19th century.
It's like it's almost prophetic, right? That
Right.
like how Malala's namesake sort of foreshadows her own courage and fight against
Gangsters.
oppression.
It's like this incredible foreshadowing, and it really speaks to Ziauddin's character.
Right.
This willingness to challenge norms from the very start.
Yeah, he's not afraid to be different.
No, not at all.
Stand out from the crowd to say like, no, I'm going to do things my way.
He's setting the stage for Malala's own journey, in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's like one of the most powerful things about her story is that it's not just like she came out of nowhere, right?
Right.
Like there's this whole family history of like standing up for what you believe in.
It's in her blood, you could say.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about life in Swat Valley, particularly for women,
Okay.
because Malala describes this world
Yeah.
where women like they hold these influential positions within the family.
Right. They're respected.
Yeah.
They're often, the core of the family unit.
Right.
But they're also confined by certain societal expectations.
Right.
Malala talks about how, women often couldn't leave the house without a male escort.
Right.
Their education was often limited.
Yeah.
And there were these practices like swara,
Yeah.
which is this, the giving away of girls to settle disputes.
Yeah, that's a difficult concept for a lot of people to grapple with.
It is, and it's a very disturbing practice
Yeah.
that really highlights the injustices that women faced.
Right. And so it's almost like this
Yeah.
juxtaposition, right, between this like beautiful, peaceful, idyllic valley and then these like really, really
Stark
harsh.
realities.
Absolutely. And I think that tension is key to understanding Malala's story.
Yeah.
Imagine living in a place of such natural beauty, but also facing these really harsh realities.
Yeah, it's like a paradise.
Right.
Lost or
In
something.
a way, yeah.
And so it's within this context that the Taliban starts to kind of
Yes.
cast a shadow over Swat Valley.
That's right.
Um, and so I think for a lot of people, they hear about the Taliban. They know it's a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
but they might not really understand like how they came to power
Right.
in Swat Valley.
Yeah.
Like, was it a sudden thing? Was it gradual? Like, how did that actually happen?
It was a complex process, and it's really intertwined with global events.
Okay.
You have the U.S. involvement in Afghanistan after 9/11,
Right.
the subsequent war, the instability that created, and this power vacuum in the region.
Right.
And religious extremism was on our rise.
Yeah.
And figures like Malala Fazlullah,
Who was also known as Radio Mullah.
Radio Mal, so he like used media.
Yes, he used radio broadcasts
Okay.
to kind of preach this very strict interpretation of Islam, and he gradually gained influence over people in Swat Valley.
And so it started off as like social reforms.
Yeah, initially it was, condemning things like music and television.
Right. Right.
Um, but soon his edicts became more and more extreme,
Okay.
and the Taliban, started enforcing their ideology through violence and intimidation.
And so this is when the ban on girls' education comes in.
Exactly.
Well-
Girls were forbidden from attending school.
Wow.
They targeted and destroyed schools. They instilled fear in the hearts of the people.
It's like they were trying to control people's lives,
Absolutely.
especially the lives of women.
It was about controlling lives and especially the lives of women.
Wow.
Like the very fabric of their society was being torn apart.
That's a really good way to put it, yeah. And we know Malala's father was outspoken against the Taliban. Was that a common thing, or was he, like, putting himself at great risk?
He was incredibly courageous.
Yeah.
He openly challenged the Taliban, not just through words,
Right.
but through actions.
Okay.
He organized protests. He kept his own school open for as long as possible.
Wow.
And there's even this account of him confronting a group of Taliban
Oh, wow.
who were burning TVs and computers in the market square.
He was, like, literally putting his life on the line.
Absolutely. He knew the consequences,
Yeah.
and yet he still stood up for what he believed in.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's an incredible testament to his character.
And so it seems like Malala kind of inherited that same spirit
Oh, absolutely.
of defiance from him.
You can see his influence throughout her life.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's during this time, living under the Taliban's rule, that Malala really starts to find her own voice.
Exactly. She becomes more than just Ziauddin's daughter.
Right.
She starts to forge her own path.
Right. And so that's where we'll pick things up next time.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so we're talking about Malala finding her voice amidst this really oppressive environment. The
right.
Taliban are in control. Girls are banned from school.
Yeah.
And Malala's what, 11 years old?
11 years old.
When she starts writing this blog for the BBC
That's unbelievable.
under the name Gulmakai.
Right.
And I'm just like, what compelled her to do that? Like, what made her think, like, I'm gonna speak out against this?
It's incredible, isn't it?
Like, when the risk is so high?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of factors.
Okay.
Obviously her father's influence,
Right.
his unwavering belief in the power of education and the right to speak truth to power
Right.
definitely played a role.
Yeah.
But I think you also see Malala's own kind of innate sense of justice.
Right.
Her empathy for her classmates who were being denied an education.
Yeah.
And maybe even a little bit of that Pashtun spirit.
Oh, Pashtunwali. Yeah, that's a term we haven't really unpacked yet. Like, what does that encompass?
Yeah. So it's this complex code of conduct.
Okay.
But some key elements are things like hospitality, courage, loyalty to one's tribe, protecting those who are vulnerable.
Okay.
It's really about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult or dangerous.
So in a way, you could say that like Malala's blog and her willingness to speak out against the Taliban was like a form of Pashtunwali.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's like embodying those principles.
So it wasn't just about education. It was about defending her community,
Exactly.
her people, her way of life.
Her culture, her identity.
It's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just the blog, right? She
Right.
also appeared on a BBC Urdu talk show
Yes.
directly challenging the Taliban's ban on girls' education.
Can you imagine the courage that took?
Like a young girl facing down this, like,
Yeah, this powerful and dangerous force.
yeah, it's almost unimaginable. But at the same time, publicly she's defying the Taliban,
Right.
but then like in her personal life, she's also attending this secret school
Yes.
with her friends. Like it seems like something out of a spy novel.
It does. It was incredibly risky.
Yeah.
A testament to both the determination of these girls
Yeah.
and the courage of their teachers and families.
Right.
They held classes in secret locations,
Right.
constantly fearing discovery.
It must have been terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Malala describes it as their own kind of silent protest,
Right.
their way of reclaiming their right to learn.
It's heartbreaking
It is.
and inspiring at the same time.
Yeah,
That they were willing to risk so much for something that, a lot of us take for granted.
absolutely.
Did her family ever consider leaving Swat Valley?
They did.
Okay.
They had opportunities to leave,
Right.
but they made a conscious choice to stay.
Wow.
They felt this deep connection to their community,
Yeah.
and they believed in standing their ground, even in the face of danger.
It's really remarkable.
It is.
But sadly, we know the story doesn't have a happy ending,
Right.
at least not in the conventional sense.
Yeah.
The attack on Malala, it's one of those moments that's like seared into our collective memory.
Absolutely.
Can you take us back to that day? Like what happened?
It was a seemingly ordinary afternoon.
Okay.
Um, Malala was riding home from school on the bus with her friends,
Right.
chatting, laughing,
Yeah.
just being normal schoolgirls.
Right.
And suddenly these masked gunmen stopped the bus.
Wow.
They boarded it,
Okay.
and they demanded to know which one was Malala.
Oh my God.
And when she identified herself,
Yeah.
they shot her at point-blank range,
Oh my goodness.
striking her in the head.
It's difficult to even fathom
It is.
the sheer brutality of that act.
Yeah, the targeting of a child
Right.
for simply wanting an education.
It's unbelievable.
It's a horrific act of violence.
What was the immediate aftermath?
Chaos fear.
Yeah.
A desperate fight for Malala's life.
Right.
She was initially treated in a Pakistani military hospital
Okay.
where she underwent emergency surgery.
And the world is watching at this point, right?
Oh, the whole world is watching, praying for her recovery.
Yeah.
And her father is obviously racked with guilt and worry,
Right.
blaming himself for putting his daughter in harm's way.
I can't even imagine.
It's a parent's worst nightmare.
To see your child suffer because of your beliefs.
Absolutely, a truly horrific situation.
And so while Malala is fighting for her life,
Right.
her story is like galvanizing people around the world.
Yes. There was this incredible outpouring of support,
Right.
condemnation of the attack, and calls for justice.
Yeah.
The world recognized her courage, her
Right.
resilience,
Hmm.
and the vital importance of her message.
It's almost like the Taliban,
Yeah.
in trying to silence her,
Right.
actually amplified her voice.
Exactly. The attack backfired spectacularly.
Yeah.
Instead of crushing her spirit,
Right.
it made her a symbol of hope and resistance.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so from the brink of death, Malala begins this like remarkable journey of recovery.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that process, the challenges she faced?
Yeah, so after undergoing initial treatment in Pakistan, Malala was flown to Birmingham, England
Okay.
for specialized medical care.
Right.
She woke up in a foreign country,
Right.
unable to speak,
Wow.
her face partially paralyzed.
Gosh.
It was, the road to recovery was long and arduous,
Yeah.
filled with surgeries, therapies,
Right.
and, just this constant struggle to regain her strength and mobility.
And on top of all of that, she is like separated from her family,
Yeah.
her home, everything familiar.
Absolutely. It was a period of immense loneliness and uncertainty for her.
Right.
10 days after the shooting, her parents finally arrived in Birmingham.
Oh, wow.
And that reunion was both joyful and bittersweet.
Yeah.
They were overjoyed to be together again.
Of course.
But they were also strangers in a strange land,
Right.
grappling with these cultural differences
Yeah.
and the longing for home.
And Malala writes about how her parents noticed a change in her personality
Yes.
after the shooting. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Like, did the trauma kind of transform her in a way?
It's a fascinating observation. Her parents said that she seemed stronger, more determined,
Oh,
even more outspoken.
wow.
It's almost as if the attack, rather than breaking her, had forged this new steel within her.
It's like a very powerful image.
It is.
So it makes you wonder if, like, the Malala that we know today,
Right.
this global icon,
Mhm.
wouldn't exist without the tragedy that she endured.
It's a difficult question to ponder, but,
Yeah.
it speaks to the complexity of the human experience.
Yeah.
Trauma can destroy, but it can also transform.
Right.
And in Malala's case, it seems to have ignited this fire within her,
Yeah.
this fierce determination to fight for her beliefs and make her voice heard on a global stage.
Yeah. So she's in this new environment.
Right.
She's recovering.
Yeah.
And the world is watching.
Mm.
Like, does she retreat from that, or does she use that platform to
No.
further her message?
If anything, her voice becomes even stronger.
She starts giving speeches.
Yes.
Writing articles, meeting with world leaders,
Mm-hmm.
all while continuing her education.
Right?
It's remarkable she never let go of that core mission,
Yeah.
the belief that all girls deserve an education.
Absolutely. It's the driving force behind everything she does.
And that leads to the creation of the Malala Fund, right?
Exactly.
And so for people who aren't familiar with that, can you talk a little bit about what that is and what it does?
Yeah. So the Malala Fund is this incredible organization
Yeah.
co-founded by Malala and her father.
Right.
And it works to empower girls through education.
Okay.
So they advocate for policy changes, they
Right.
support local activists,
Okay.
and they really work to break down barriers
Yeah.
that keep girls out of school.
And it's global, right?
It's global. Yeah. They work all over the world.
It's really amazing.
Yeah. An incredible testament to her commitment to this cause.
Yeah. And one of the things that really struck me reading her story
Yeah.
was just how she never seems to give in to anger or bitterness,
Right.
despite everything she's been through.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah. Was that always part of her personality, or did that kind of emerge as a result of the attack?
That's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I think certainly the values instilled by her parents played a role.
Right.
But I also think there's this really deep wisdom in her approach.
Okay.
She consistently emphasizes dialogue, understanding, even forgiveness.
Right.
It's almost as if she sees education itself as a weapon against hatred and intolerance.
Yeah. So instead of seeking revenge, she's seeking solutions.
Exactly. And that's a really powerful message.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And so, it makes me think about her broader impact.
Right.
Is it fair to say that Malala's story goes beyond just girls' education?
I think so.
Yeah.
It touches on so many themes.
Yeah, like courage.
Courage, resilience,
Right.
the fight for human rights.
Yeah.
It really resonates with people from all walks of life
I think so, too.
because it speaks to something universal,
Right.
the human spirit's capacity to overcome adversity.
Right. And also, it kind of forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths.
Yes, absolutely.
The world,
Yeah,
the injustices that still exist,
right.
the work that remains to be done.
It's a call to action in a way.
Yeah.
It's not just a feel-good story.
Right.
It's a story that challenges us
Yeah.
to do better, to be better.
So as we kind of reach the end of our deep dive here,
Okay.
what would you say are the most important takeaways?
Well, I think first and foremost, the power of education.
Yeah.
Not just as a means to a better life,
Right.
but as a force for social change, for empowerment, for peace.
Right.
Malala's story is a reminder that education isn't just about facts and figures.
Right.
It's about nurturing critical thinking, empathy,
Yeah.
and the courage to stand up for what's right.
And it's about the importance of individual action, right? Like
Yeah.
Malala's journey shows that one person, even a young girl, can make a difference.
Yes, one voice can change the world.
And it's inspiring, but it's also a little bit daunting,
I understand that.
because it makes you ask yourself, like, what can I do?
Right, what can I do to make a difference?
Yeah.
And I think that's the right question to ask.
Yeah.
We can all contribute in our own ways.
Yeah.
It might be supporting organizations like the Malala Fund,
Right.
or volunteering to tutor children,
Yeah.
or simply having conversations about these issues, raising awareness within our own communities.
Yeah.
Change starts with individual actions,
Right.
however small they may seem.
And maybe it starts with asking ourselves, like, what small act of courage can I take today? Like what can I do
Yeah.
to be a little bit more like Malala? Well, this has been a really, really fascinating conversation.
It has.
I feel like I learned a lot, and I hope our listeners did too.
I hope so too.
Malala's story is a call to action.
It is.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play
Absolutely.
in creating a more just and equitable world.
Yeah.
Her journey's far from over,
Right.
but the impact she's already had is immeasurable.
Truly remarkable.
I think that's a good place to leave our listener
Okay.
with that sense of hope and possibility.
I agree. Malala's story is proof that even in the darkest of times,
Yeah.
the human spirit can prevail,
Right.
and that even the smallest voice can spark a global movement.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. It's been a pleasure.
It's in my pleasure as well.